Well, welcome everybody. Very glad to have our small group today on this beautiful birthday. And I completely understand if we're going to spend more of our time actually looking out at the gorgeous day as we are looking at one another and engaging in this wonderful topic that we have to share. My name is Mike Mayer. I am part of the Caring for Our Own group that has been meeting informally now for over a year. And I'd just like to launch into an image for you that really is what got us started in all of this. 4th of July, 2017. I know a number of people here knew Rupa Cousins, beloved member of our community, who also was really inspired by nature, by circle dancing, by being with people and sharing fellowship and the essence of life in important ways. And as she was evolving in her bout with cancer, a recurrent form that was progressing rapidly, she was asked, would you like to be buried on the land in this place, the Manitou land, which you have known for 20-odd years, and next to Pam Mayer, who was an old friend of yours, and it took her about half a second to say, well, that would be perfect. And we were able actually to have an extraordinary ceremony on, well, it was a day and a half after her last visit there when she died, just before she died. Word got out, and because she was so loved, oh gosh, over 150 people showed up at this amazing event where we had this flower-draped, handmade wooden coffin wind in single file procession through the woods to what was her final resting place. And it was a multi-generational, multi-sectarian service where numerous people danced and sung and offered their memories of what an extraordinary life we celebrated with Rupa. And normally when you have a graveside ceremony, people just do what they need to do and move on. Well, there wasn't anybody that wanted to leave that place on that somewhat gray day because the sense of community, the sense of sharing was so extraordinary. People were moved. And as a result of that, and as a result of 2 meetings that an expert in natural burial, green burial, a person by the name of Lee Webster, she took great interest in what we were doing here. She was invited by Brattleboro Area Hospice to come down and talk about green burial. Is it possible? What can you do in Vermont? All of these things evolved into a group beginning to meet on a monthly basis, and that group has become known as Caring for Our Own. And really what we're here to talk about today, share, is 2 thrusts. One, to talk about the practical alternatives we have to what happens after hospice, what happens when we die or when loved ones die. How can we care for them in a way that is consistent with our values and our love for the person who has died? And how can we do so in a way that really honors the earth and honors the traditions we have that value one another in life? How can we also do it in death? So it's number 1, the practical alternatives, and number 2, we began discovering, as those of you who have been a part of the group know, we've begun discovering what it means to be an elder and to appreciate eldering among us. How are we called to be the person that we really can be in our later years? And I know a lot of us are finding that now are the best years of our life. Anyway, I'm just going to stop right there and just go through a couple of the things that we know have been important to the group, and maybe just as we always do with the group, we just start with a moment of silence and allowing stillness to guide our reflections. And because we don't have a lot of time, maybe we'll just be silent for maybe half a minute and we just invite us to be still for a moment, and I'll just read this passage that has been meaningful to a number of us. We used it at our last meeting. May we live this day compassionate of heart, clear in word, gracious in awareness, courageous in thought, and generous in love. And may we use our time together today and days moving forward to explore what opportunities open for us in community and in our deeper knowing of ourselves. Well, thank you for just allowing that moment of stillness into our circle. I've introduced myself. Ananda, would you like to just say why you're sitting up here next to me?
Sure. My name is Ananda Forrest, and I'm always going to be so grateful to Mike and his mom for introducing me to Manitou, and also to the whole concept of green burial, which just, when he introduced me to it 8 years ago, I had this huge hole in my heart because my aunt, my beloved aunt, had just passed, and I was with her when she drew her last breath, was allowed to sit with her for an hour in the hospital, and then she disappeared into the freezer in the basement. And I didn't see her again until she was ashes months later, and it just felt wrong. But I didn't know what to do about it until Mike explained this amazing thing that had just happened with his mom. So I went to a workshop with him about green burials and home funerals were introduced at the workshop, and the two of them just go together like this. And it's just a way of really unpacking the incredible gift that death offers us.
That was a number of years ago, too, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
2011, November 2011. And you introduced me to my future wife, too, at that time. So, the debts just keep on piling up. And she also works with me in home funerals. I was unable to be here today. Her name is Ashana.
So home funerals is one of the practical ways that we can actually get our hands dirty or get actively involved in doing everything that has traditionally been so important to cultures other than our own before the undertaker industry came in and persuaded us that that really wasn't the way we might otherwise proceed. On a practical front, what we have talked about in our group is that there are really three levels of putting dead bodies into the ground. There's natural burial, which is something that the state of Vermont has actually created a statute to make possible. Natural burial grounds are actually legal in the state of Vermont, so that's one of the things which really helped to focus us in our being able to move forward. Green burial is another way of characterizing that process. It's a little more ecologically focused, so it's not just putting a body in the ground no matter what. It's actually doing so, not using embalming, not using other things that might otherwise be different from natural interment, not using a concrete vault, which is typically used in graveyards. The most ecologically sound and purest, if you will, form of green burial, natural burial, is having a conservation cemetery where there are rules around how the place is maintained, how the holes are dug. There are no pesticides used to mow lawns. There's careful understanding of the ecological environment above ground as well as below ground. So what are the indigenous species that we most want to support? And in that way, how do we make sure that the placement of graves are not going to interfere with the specimen trees that are most valuable to us? How can we actually create permeable trails, wheelchair access trails that become part of a conservation strategy? And that is what is actually being developed now in Williamsville. We're still waiting for final zoning action in order to make it.
Is Williamsville Manitou?
Williamsville is the village of Newfane, and we've begun a process of what would be changing zoning to allow for 3 words, natural burial grounds, in what is known as a resource district or conservation district. This is what the state has paved the way for, but every municipality has to make sure that zoning can allow for it, so we're just being
So that's where
patient.
Manitou is?
Manitou is located, Manitou is 225 acres of land conserved by the Vermont Land Trust. It is owned by the Manitou Project, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. It's a membership organization, and the land that is being targeted for a conservation cemetery is land that is actually being given to a new nonprofit which has been formed, a 501c3 organization called the Higher Ground Conservation Cemetery Association, Inc. Higher ground because it's up on a ridge. And,
This is different than Manitou. This is not.
it is alongside Manitou, and it's been privately donated to this entity, and once zoning can be made the zoning bylaws are changed to allow this, then it will become an actively an operational entity that could use it. But right now, the rule is in Vermont, you can bury members of your own family on land that is owned by the family. And that's what happened with Pamela Mayer. She was buried on her own land. And when Rupa Cousins was buried, it was thought initially that special exception might be made. There was a legitimate misunderstanding about how, what would actually be done, and everybody with the state, when they realized it had happened, said, okay, well, from now on, let's make sure we play by the rules, and that's really what's happening now. So subsequent to that, we've been going through the public hearing process and making appropriate, taking appropriate steps to make this happen. Just another quick note on this. When the state envisioned some years ago that natural burial was something that made a bunch of sense, given the values of the state and the local towns, they made very clear that 3 different kinds of entities would be in a position to make green burial happen. Municipalities and their normal cemeteries could come to know what a green burial would look like and could decide that that's the route they wanted to go. Certainly churches have burial grounds as well. The interesting thing that is the direction that we took here in Brattleboro was to actually form this new nonprofit, and that's it. If you have a natural burial association formed as a not-for-profit organization, you too can do your own burials and follow the rules that are both set up by the state and more specifically through local zoning. So anyway, that's what we're in the process of doing. Don't want to spend a whole lot more time just talking at you about where we are with that process, because I know some of you are already aware of that. But we could just engage in more discussion as to the different ways that we can work, how families can do it on their own land, how for members of their own family, maybe talk a little bit more about what the whole funeral process is like, and maybe just open it up now, because there's a lot of information. How can we misuse this time?
Yeah,
to
I just understand that it is kind of a difficult process for burying somebody on your own land. You have to follow a lot of different complicated things with the state, and
If you were to decide, if you were to decide to do it on your own land, there are 2 things you first have to be able to establish. Number 1, a setback requirement from wetlands, from public access, from waterways. And number 2, you have to have a minimum depth requirement. You have to be able to meet that. 3.5 feet.
Who tests it? Do you call somebody up and say, come in and make sure that I'm obeying all the rules?
Depending on the town.
Like Brattleboro, for instance.
I can.
Like when I die tomorrow, they let me be buried in my own yard.
This is something that is worth exploring, because I haven't done it for Brattleboro. I've done it twice in the town of Newfane. And in that case, we called the public health officer. And in the first case, he came out and took a tape down, and he said, "Looks like we're all set here," wrote a letter, and there it was. That was formal, because that was the first time. The next time around, he said, "Well, we've got another burial coming up." I said, "Are you good?" And I said, "Yep." He said, "Okay, off you go." So that became a little less formal. But I think you need to be prepared to understand what the requirements are. And then, since it hasn't been done in Brattleboro on family land in recent times that I'm aware of, so it would be worth talking with the town clerk, town officials, and say, how would we go about this? Now, there are people who would like to assist in that process if specifically you'd like to explore that. I mentioned Lee Webster a while ago. She's actually a national expert. She's our neighbor in New Hampshire. She'll be coming back again. She loves what we're doing. She says, you know, there are groups that are doing this sort of thing all over the country, but never has one, to her knowledge, formed out of an existing nonprofit conservation organization. It's usually from faith communities or from families who are donating land. But in this case, it's actually been motivated by a group of people who have already formed a conservation and really spiritually oriented community with nature is the tagline for the Manitou Project. So she's always there to help too. So
My friend just died, and I could die tomorrow,
Yeah.
and I want to know how to do it.
Right.
And as I understand it, this new thing is still not legal, or you can't do it there yet?
we're still moving through the process of requesting a zoning
Takes a while.
amendment. And
Is there any
that's
place
the
in
process.
Vermont where you actually could be buried if it's not in your land? Where? Where is it?
Were you going to say something?
I don't have the specific answers, but I can find them fairly quickly for you. My goal is to be buried in my backyard, also here at Brattleboro. So we've got similar questions there.
Okay.
In fact, I even have
Sounds
3 white oak seedlings growing. I'm hoping that one of them will be alive when I pass. My aspiration is to be a tree. So I want to be buried as close to the white oaks that I can be of some
That
use.
sounds good.
So we should look into that.
I have a question, natural versus green. I'm guessing natural allows a pine box so many feet under, and the green has to do with decomposition and keeping the soil clean of pesticides and anything that would inhibit the natural deterioration.
Both of what you've talked about are natural and green. I think we don't have to spend an awful lot of time deciphering the distinction. When you don't use embalming, when you don't use concrete vaults,
Yeah.
that's really when you start to get more and more defined in terms of what is really green. Natural is being just, let's put a body in the earth and not be quite as restrictive with respect to what's going in with the body or into the body. Green is, we're not putting toxins into the soil that might leach into what's happening there, so.
And just another simple question, who says what family is?
I've been told that it really has to do with, I don't know, I'm not going to play lawyer on that for you.
Blood.
We try, I tried to make the case that a very close family friend was actually like family, and it was sort of generally said, well, it doesn't look like you share a last name, or you're proven cousins, and that sort of thing. So
Presumably if you're married.
I think marriage helps. I think being offspring, or if there's lineage. I think.
So we have to get married if we're gonna.
Oh, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Common law, I'm sure.
No.
Well, you're both on the land, so.
Yeah, we own the house
Like
Oh,
together.
one of you.
we own the land. That's
Well,
right.
that's
I
close
think
enough.
that's the main.
Oh,
You own the
okay.
land.
Okay, we own the land jointly.
Thank you.
If you pay the taxes, that's what they really want to know.
I think it probably
I'll talk
makes
to my
sense,
accountant.
getting a legal opinion on that.
Okay.
Just to follow up on the possibility of other places in the area, other cemeteries and whatnot. you know, we haven't really delved into that very deeply in our group in terms of what we can do with these places and whether we can do a green burial or natural burial in those places. So that's something to look into, so.
I actually
For some
agreed in the
people.
last meeting where you weren't there, I said I would do that.
So, what do you know? You didn't
So I'll let you
come.
know what happened.
There's the cemetery right between Brattleboro and West Brattleboro. Is it Shaker Hill or Quaker Hill? That little cemetery?
Meeting house.
Oh, Meeting Hill.
They'll allow you to do a
That's
green
right.
burial.
Yeah.
We buried our dear friend Margaret there, and it was a
Oh,
green
really?
burial.
Yeah.
Because
Well-
Manitou wasn't ready for her yet.
So there is a place.
Yeah, they have kind of a green corner.
Yeah.
And do you know, I mean, I think of cemeteries, sometimes graves are on top of each other, but, you know, normally they're placed reasonable distance. Does the green option require generally, all the environmental considerations aside, generally a larger space? I think I heard the Manitou, 200 acres, but only room for 180 in my
Okay.
hearing room.
We're not going to talk an awful lot about what is projected on the land adjacent to Manitou, because it's not actually on the Manitou land. I want to clarify that. What we can say is that at Meeting House Cemetery, as Ananda was saying, they've agreed that bodies can be interred without a vault, and that I guess arrangements would be made for additional soil being placed in what otherwise is a dip in the land. One of the reasons why cemetery commissions like vaults are, instead of having this large hole filled just with dirt, which settles over time, which means you have to put more dirt on to get you back up to grade, you start with a mound in a green burial arrangement so that, you know, over a couple of seasons it settles down, or maybe you add a bit more dirt later. These are things that evidently are the operators at Meeting Hill have agreed to. So these are the kinds of things that you actually can do now in Brattleboro.
So I have a question. Is there any, do you have markers of any sort, or you just become an anonymous part of the land?
I think we have a guest with us today who can speak to how it was done in Prairie Creek.
Yes, they are a conservation cemetery, that's the highest level, I think.
Yeah.
So nothing that isn't present on the land can be bought in. There was
Could
two-
you specify where it's located?
outside of Gainesville in Florida. It's, I think, 100 acres, and they have 90 burials there. Florida's really very quick at going to ground. So you can barely tell where any of the burial mounds
You mean
are.
people decompose faster?
Well, and the ground, it just all seems to decay much faster in Florida. The heat
Warmth
and all of that. So when you go in there, you hardly see anything except for in the new burials, which are quite well mounded. But they have this brass marker. This is not part of the lens. And that goes in over the body. And it connects with your cell phone. You can find a number that you have for the spot. And then you can find the spot where the burial
You
is.
just hang out there.
They're in the same, you aren't taking the same hole.
Say that again?
You aren't taking the
You
same
don't-
hole year after year. There's some record
Right.
kept.
So you don't go on top of each other.
Well, you almost could with green burial because
Right.
the body
Sure.
is decomposing, so somebody
After
can be
10
right next
years.
door.
Yeah.
Except that the rule is 3.5
Oh,
feet, I believe that is in
Personal
Florida. I
space.
don't know what
In
it's
Florida.
here.
Keep
Yeah.
your personal space.
You have your personal space, and you have your marker for your personal space. But
But no
otherwise,
gravestones.
you can have flowers, you know, at the funeral, at the whole thing, but you can't bring things that aren't indigenous. So if there's stones around, I mean, I didn't see any cairns, they don't like, Florida doesn't have any stones anyway, so,
I guess
That
it's
should-
Can you plant a tree?
what?
Can you plant trees?
No, they have trees, and you can pick a spot that has a
Oh,
tree,
okay.
you know, it's a forest.
Yeah, that's it.
So, and they are getting rid of a lot of the softwoods. They are clearing the land to a certain extent, because the softwoods go to ground so fast that if people choose that, then your tree isn't around very much.
So we're all moving to Florida? Is that-
Yeah.
So I think
not.
that's a wonderful example of something that's up and running that I think might be a good model for what we're looking to do here. And one of the things here that I think we're excited about is becoming not just a community that is open to this idea, that is exploring options, that is becoming knowledgeable about the different things that we can do both in our own homes, on our own land rather, and jointly with a nonprofit-owned natural burial ground. But we're also thinking about how we can advise others, jurisdictions, other areas, maybe outside our region, to follow the lead that we might take, the model that we would create to show that really this is doable. It's something that everyone supports. It's something that ultimately has lots of strategic value and conservation value and spiritual value, and all the things that we think are important. I think, today this isn't a grand announcement as to suddenly, everybody come. You've got a place to come just outside of town, which where you could be buried in a new place. This is just to share some of what is in the early stages of being explored, and we hope soon to be possible for people. We've got a list of folks who are really interested in not just discussing this and being part of a community that's helping to develop it, but also saying, yeah, put me on a list. And there are other landowners who are curious about whether or not they might be able to make land available to an entity such as the Higher Ground Conservation Burial Association to do this sort of thing.
I have another sort of musing, which is proportion-wise, probably, do most people know about this? And if the will is already made, are they saying, I want to be cremated? And then if they die, do you have to honor that? I mean, obviously, you probably have to honor their wishes. Something that would be built into the education is to get people to think about their wills and if they have those wishes already stated. And also, how do you deal with, I don't know if there's organ donors, can they be shipped to you after
Just the
their
organs.
eyes are taken or their, whatever they're donating is taken, or is that process completely on a different track?
Right.
Good
That's a good question.
But how to get people to shift their thinking, basically, or become aware of it.
All great questions, and I think the reason for our group to meet to explore, I mean, we are developing little subcommittees in our group to explore what how would we like to see it done in our community, what would we want to see happen, and as we become more informed and better able to actually practice some of these things, then we'll get legal advice. I mean, here's a resource now for doing home funerals. I mean, here's an expert in that area. Hopefully we become an expert. The nonprofit that would be doing this down the road, we would want to be able to assist others to explore these kinds of things. I think one of the outputs of our coming together and spending time with this is a guidebook of sorts that can help to steer people. It could be part of their living wills, the kinds of things that can inform what a conscious dying process might include.
I could also see just a really nice front page article in the Commons or in the Reformer that would just reach a whole lot of people who might not even know this exists. That could, delineate And, yeah,
Possibilities.
and the Commons would write it if you could get them interested in it.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We know that hospice is very interested in this. Brattleboro Area Hospice has sponsored a couple of sessions. Again, the expert coming to town, Lee Webster. There are other hospice entities that are beginning to inquire as to how they might incorporate some of what we're talking about into their practice. So it's really about creating awareness and building education and building some support around how we would want to make this available in our community. And I think that's, once again, coming back to what the function of our group is to just be a place where these ideas can be shared, developed, and begin to further the presence of this motivation and this possibility in our community.
Excuse me, I spoke with Lee, and she said that she was encouraging us, as I was called her, to have a workshop on how to do, how do you prepare the body and the different options. And so that would be a way. I mean, I would be willing to write an article for the Commons about if we could get a group to teach that.
Yeah, that's what Ishan and I are planning to do in the very near future. We're talking with Fred, and we've been talking to the group about how to schedule that. It sounds like people would like to have that over a series of...
thing.
Yeah.
Maybe
Absolutely.
here. Well, yeah, so it's already happening. When is it happening?
We haven't got the dates yet, but we're getting very close.
Is it going to be public or is it going to be private?
Well, it'll be open to this group, but it'll also be open to people outside the group.
Yeah, as long as that was advertised.
Yeah, exactly, good advertising.
Is it going to be free or is it going to
There'll be a suggested donation.
Yeah.
so people who can't afford it could still come?
Of course, yeah, we're not, the whole idea of this organization is empowerment, self-empowerment around such an important transition phase for everybody.
So in other words, you are planning to do something like that in the spring, and it would be good to have an article in the Commons?
Yeah, it'd be fantastic. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Let's talk about, we have a number of things to talk about.
Yeah,
Right.
because it would also help demystify, sorry,
Oh,
help demystify.
That it's
People hear
actually-
green
you can
burial,
do
and
this.
the worms are gonna eat me, and it's like, you.
Exactly.
Actually, one of our first meetings up at Manitou for this Green Burial group, we had an experience with Lee Webb as far as going through the process of burying somebody and showing how to roll the body over and wash the body and making sure you can get through all the doors and all these aspects of the practical aspects of getting the body out the door.
I'm very interested in that.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's such a beautiful process.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really, it can be as ceremonial as you like, or it can be as practical as you like.
and in a way, it really requires having several people there because the body is not light.
Right.
So you're sort of, brought into this
You need
group
to do it
effort.
together.
Yes.
Everybody's doing it together, and this is part of the home of taking care of your own.
Exactly.
Did the meetings evolve out of that group? It seems to me like they did,
Yes.
right? That
Yeah,
was an
that-
initial gathering,
Yeah.
which I wasn't able to go to, but kind of heard through you,
Right.
and then the meetings went on from there.
Well, and also the business about how to mark or not mark. I think it's like in charrette schools and communities where each community has a way they choose how. So it's really an individual thing. I'm thinking, well, I don't know if I want to have it unmarked. I think I might like to have a place where you can meditate and maybe have a picture of, so that each family even or each person within a group could evolve their own way to do this, the funeral, and it could be as plain and pure in a way as each person wants. So I guess I do feel the value of a core of people committed to making death a sacred thing and in going into the earth and however way we do it. But I really want to know how, when, where, and what to do.
And backing up is, once the person has died, if they've died at home or if they've died in hospice or wherever they are, you have to, someone has to say this person is dead, and then you have to have a death certificate.
Right, and that's the
takes
workshop that
time.
Ishan and I are gonna
Yeah.
offer, probably in 2 or 3 parts. We'll
Yeah.
address all those details. We have, the
Yeah.
Kiln Funeral can be broken down into 7 parts, and if anybody wants a copy of this, I can
So
give it to
this,
them.
so this sounds
But we go
very-
through all the parts,
Yeah.
and everyone can do them differently, depending on their druthers.
Well, I mean, I think you guys are doing great work, and I am really low income. I mean, we both are, so if we were to both pay the suggested donation.
It's by donation, yeah, exactly.
It
We're
would
not-
be.
And also for this group in particular, right? That's why, you
Yeah.
know, there's a special intimacy.
You know, I understand you wanting to get somehow, you know, reimbursed or.
Well,
but,
it's by donation, so,
yeah,
you know, it's
yeah.
it's
You
not
know,
our
the
primary
thing-
source of income
Yeah,
by any
problem
means. It's
with
just a
don-
practice that we're
Okay.
developing, and we're gonna see where it goes.
Okay, so you're basically, I just want to clarify, you're basically doing a similar thing to what Lee did.
Exactly.
Maybe
Yeah.
even more elaborate, but you're doing what Rick got to experience, I didn't get to
Exactly.
experience.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's really part of the broader idea of developing local capacity and momentum to really serve the needs and interests of the broader community as more and more people begin to notice that this is something that we could explore and make available to those we love. So it's a
Right.
wonderful resource.
And
What
once
is
you
the
learn-
group? Can you tell us about the group? What is
Oh.
the group?
My
More than
group
one
is-
group.
Ishan and I have it's called Healing Gate, and it's Healing Gate Home Funerals. And we both teach people how to do their own home funerals, and we're also helping to help work as guides with people. But the idea ultimately is to empower people to do it for themselves.
My problem is, I think it's hard when people know they're supposed to donate to not donate. So I guess I would feel better if it were very low-key about donation. That you are working as an evolution and a branch of this group, that we work together, and that as we learn how to do it, or we all know how to do it, that I don't want it to be a monopoly, in other words. And I guess I mean, I know myself, I'm not totally poor at all, but it's difficult for me when somebody wants a donation, you know, so it's a little, I just think it's a touchy thing.
Of course it is. Money is a hugely loaded and complicated issue.
Right, and this is supposed to be not about that. It's a radical new way that we approach death and ourselves and the community. And so I think what we're doing is very radical, and I want to keep it as individually determined and respectful of economic
Absolutely.
As
circumstances.
open-armed.
As open-armed as possible. So I certainly want to learn how to do it. I want to know tomorrow how to do it. I feel
Yeah.
very ignorant, and especially since I just lost a friend, and they didn't know a thing about it. I think it's our obligation to ourselves and the world. We're older, we come out of the alternative way of, you know, we're committed to this, we are this is why we're in the club. So I just do want to say that, and I foresee even us evolving into smaller groups that are more, you know, some people may want to cremate, some people may want to have a granite stone but still be with us. So.
Well, maybe you could still cremate and still go to Manitou and be buried there, or no? That's a.
One of the things, one of the interesting ecological footnotes to cremation is that there's a substantial amount of carbon that is released in the firing of remains. Burning at a very high heat for 2 hours creates 200 plus pounds of carbon, releases that into the air.
So you wouldn't even let those
So
people come in
the
there?
idea is that those ashes actually are not going to nourish your rose bush. They'll probably kill your rose bush because there's so much, I think it's calcium that is so intense there. So similarly, those ashes don't want to go into a stream or the ocean because they will destabilize the natural pH of water. So the more ecological, the sounder ecological approach here is to actually put the soft tissue, dead remains, into the ground so that it can decompose with all of the natural processes that happen when oxygen is available from the surface to 3.5 foot depth. If you go below 3.5 feet, beyond 4 feet, there's not a whole lot that happens.
Right.
And the decomposition is not going to really service the mycelial threads and all the bacterial interactions that occur with the microcilial interactions
That's what you
below.
do with your garden.
Yeah, so there's just again, this comes straight from our friend Lee Webster, who says, you know, if you're really wanting to do the right thing from an Earth Day standpoint, you're actually putting remains back into the ground the way it has traditionally been done.
So we need standards. There will be some standards about a green burial.
Once again, when the Higher Ground Conservation Cemetery Association becomes operational and the various zoning matters are attended to, there will be clear guidelines with respect to process, with respect to, you know, here's what works and what doesn't, here's how we do markers, here are cost factors. One of the things that Higher Ground is going to be very sensitive to is when there is a base rate, which would be below market for what a normal burial might be, a substantial portion of the fee that would be suggested would go into a pool that could support those who can't afford that fee. So in that way, we'd want to be very sensitive to affordability issues, and in that way, not turn away people who don't have ability to pay sticker price.
Can I,
Go ahead.
have you gotten much push, aside from regulatory conservatism about getting all the ducks in a row, have you gotten much pushback from people, from the funeral industry, from, you know, churches, from who have different ideas? I don't know.
Churches, every church and faith community we've been in contact with has been very
I
supportive.
would think so.
Some of them have actually been reaching out to us and saying, how can we help? How can we be involved? We are also in touch with people in the funeral industry who value what we're doing and think that we serve a part of the industry that they will not serve. And so I appreciate having had those kinds of goodwill discussions with them. So
They're not going to work against you.
it's very important for us to recognize that we're operating transparently and that we're not trying to undermine existing market forces in the world. We're trying to create an alternative that meet a need that is present in the community.
I just want to say something about size, because as Helen says, you know, there's this idea of spreading the word, and then my thought is this is going to take off like big time, that there will be so many people who want, at least in this area, who want a home funeral or green burial. We won't even, it's like opening up, you know, something huge. And you know, maybe Higher Ground won't be able to accommodate all those people. I mean, I likely won't. And just, I'm just putting out there, I mean, I don't have a vision for it, but I think as a group, maybe we want to have an idea of like smaller groups, or how do you know, if there are like hundreds of people interested in this, we'll have to somehow figure out how that's structured at some point, and what are the options, and what's available, and is there enough availability compared to the amount of people who are interested in. I mean, these are just questions I'm putting out. I have no answers.
It's such an important question, and I think really what the board of Higher Ground will be doing is coming back to our core mission, which is how can we do this in a limited basis in a way that can help show the way to others, so that this could be a model for others to do it as well, so that what we do, we're planting a seed, and that this can become a more present to more people, not just because we are the be-all, end-all, but because we've shown that actually it can be done in a way that is consistent with what the community would like, what local interests recognize as being appropriate and serving their interests.
So it sets the groundwork pardon the pun, for other such entities, yeah,
Yeah.
possible.
And that's the philosophy behind
Yeah.
home funerals also,
Yeah.
that it's not
Yeah.
supposed to be a profit-making system. It's done by communities, and it's about empowering. You're teaching people to fish, so they can teach other people to fish.
Yeah, yeah.
Just as we were taught.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, sure.
And also there's the different layers that there is. Conservation cemeteries are the top grade as far as I'm concerned. But there's private ones in Florida that are like botanical gardens. I mean, they're manicured and
Green
they're,
burial or?
it's a
Well,
green burial, but
natural
it's
burial.
a garden environment. Laura Starkey, whose family owns half of Central Florida, has started, that's where, anyway, she has done it's beautiful, but it's not what I consider a conservation cemetery. It's a whole other level, and some people like that. It's outside of Tampa, they have more money there.
There's always going to be people who want that. Well, I think there'd be different, kind of places where you could choose a group,
Yeah.
like giving help to people to design their own funeral, and design, what do you want to say, what do you want to sing, do you want it, so that you could choose the one that you identify with. There could be many branches, as the same as there'd be many styles of these, kind of like styles. Like, we don't have to have millions of denominations of the Protestant religion. We can keep it all natural, but have various styles, really.
Well, it makes me think, you mentioned the connection between home birth and,
Yeah.
natural birth, natural death. Some people choose to have a birth in a hospital with a midwife, some people at home.
If there were any further questions that we wanted to really deal with before we end, but, yes.
But my question is, can we also talk to the people who manage our cemeteries in town to see if this is something that they will be allowed to be done? Because that's very important. There is plenty of room in that cemetery, in many other cemeteries, so this can be kind of something that goes all through Vermont.
It makes a lot of sense, and I think there's certainly interest in our group to reach out in that way and see how can we both work with people who are in the funeral industry, and they're distinct from the cemeteries. The cemetery owners are not the people who are actually preparing bodies and creating, dealing with all the details of getting a body.
Doesn't each
managed.
town have a cemetery commission?
Yes.
That
Yeah.
might be interesting, yeah.
To
We
one
could-
for Elmore, yeah.
And each town, so there's no question, but that creating some movement in that direction would make a lot of sense. So it's a very constructive
And I think
suggestion.
it's such a new movement that it's going to take a while to get this idea across of how this works.
And people want to say, well, where has it been done before, so that we don't have to be the first? And
It's been done everywhere until about 100 years ago.
But with climate change being more important for many people in Vermont, I think that this is an idea that will be welcomed by many, especially people on longer courses that can afford those big things.
Yeah. And that's why it's called higher ground, right?
Stevie Wonder stuff.
Well, thank you. Let's continue the discussion if we like, but in terms of our formal discussion here, thanks very much for being a part of it, and for anybody who is joining us on Vermont Cable, thank you for joining us as well. And I think it would be, we would ask you to keep an eye out in the Commons and the Reformer for articles that would be furthering the information of the group, what we're doing. Again, Caring for Our Own is an informal group that meets monthly, the third Tuesday of every month, 3:30 to 5:30 at Center Congregational Church on Main Street here in Brattleboro. Anybody's welcome, and what happens, people come a little bit early, and we help to introduce those who've not been there before, a little bit before 3:30, a little bit of what we've been doing before, and certainly welcome. So thanks for having
As long
time
as,
together.
yeah.